I did not say under the law means obeying God's law. I'm going to prove it, if you'll just stick with me. Religious interpretations have destroyed your entire understanding of my contribution to Scripture with one simple verse that religious leaders don't want you to think about too deeply. I hate to burst your bubble, but I'm the Apostle Paul, and I need you to carefully consider what I actually said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 and 20. Even though I am a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived and communicated like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. In other words, when I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Jewish law and God's law are not one and the same, even though I am not subject to the Jewish law. I did this so I could bring to Christ those who live by the Jewish law. Now listen carefully, because this is important. One of the major accusations against me in Acts 21 verse 28 was that I taught people everywhere to abandon the Torah and ignore Moses' teachings. But when I stood before Felix in Acts 24 verse 14, I testified that I worship the God of our ancestors and firmly believe God's law and everything written in the prophets. And in verse 13, I flat out denied their charges, because there was absolutely not proof of them. In other words, I did not teach people to ignore God's law. Here's what will blow your mind. In that Corinthians passage, I named 3 distinct groups of people: the Jews, those without the law, and those under the law. Think about this logically. If being obedient to Torah means being under the law like your religious doctrine teaches from my other letters, then that would just be the Jews, right? But clearly they're not the same group, or I wouldn't have needed to add a separate category called those under the law. Ask any convicted felon what it means to be under the law, and they'll tell you straight up. You've broken the law, and now the consequences are coming down on you. You're facing judgment. You're in trouble with the legal system. It's that simple when you think about it, without letting man-made religious doctrine cloud your understanding. The Jews were Torah-observant believers. Those without law were the Gentiles who never had Torah. And those under the law were people facing God's judgment for breaking His commands. 3 completely different groups requiring 3 different approaches to reach them with the gospel message. See Hebrews 4:2 to see the gospel was preached in the wilderness to those given God's law in written form. Kind of a clue for you about what the gospel really is. This changes everything about how we read Scripture when we stop forcing Greek philosophical ideas onto Hebrew thinking and just let the text speak for itself. Discuss this with respect in the comments, or I'll just delete the comment. Like, follow, share, to help Remnant Nation continue releasing great content.